Leave me alone, sad and lonely. Don't wanna let go of this feeling. Leave me to roam, sad and wander. There's too many cracks in my ceiling. I've got plenty of time to think of heaven, but right now there's too much on my mind, and I'm had enough that religious stuff. And besides, I can't relate to your kind. Oh. Give me more darkness and the lightning. Give me more falling and the moon. Give me stone silence and the dead man. I didn't believe Sunday school. Okay, thank you all for joining me this morning. My name is Alonzo Fleming, and you are in Sunday school. I'll tell you a little bit about why I chose to do this morning, and every morning until I'm led to, just change up. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in Sunday school. In fact, Sunday school was my favorite class in church. But I think the church did too good of a job in teaching me because it just prompted me to research and do a whole lot of things that I saw when I looked around. I saw a lot of other people wasn't doing, but a lot of the stories that I was learning in Sunday school, I went and did a lot of background discussion, a lot of background investigation to see exactly whether or not those things were true. And I'll tell you a little story before we get started in this lesson, exactly what incident really prompted me to put me on a path to studying deeper just about everything that I came in contact with. I was on the bus one day as a teenager going to school. And in Detroit, we caught the bus to school, the regular city buses. And I was one of those people who liked to witness to people about God as I went to school. If I saw somebody my age, I would sit next to them on the bus and we just started talking. I would engage them in a conversation about the goodness of the Lord. And it went well. I met many people during that, and I learned to communicate with people quite well during that experience. But this one particular day, I got on the bus and sat next to this young man about my age, about 17, 18 years old. And I just started talking to him, and I started telling him all the things that I knew in the Bible, all the things about the goodness of Jesus and how he could be saved, and how he needed to be baptized in a certain way, and how he needed to speak in tongues, and all this stuff. I'm telling this guy as we're riding the bus. And all during the time, I guess I was talking to him about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And the only thing he was doing was shaking his head and nodding as though he was paying attention to what I was saying. He was really engaged. He wasn't saying anything, but he was engaged. He was, he was giving me body language saying, to suggest that he was listening and paying attention to everything I had to say. So, just as it was time for him to get off the bus, he stood up, looked at me, and asked me a question. Now, how do you know all that stuff is true? And for the first time in my life, I asked myself that question. I had been reading the Bible, I had been studying and listening to the preachers and going to Sunday school. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself that question. Yeah, how do I know all this stuff is true? It was that young man at age, when I was about 16 to 17 years old, that actually put me on this path with that one question. How do you know all that stuff is true? He's the one that put me on the path. And as a result of that question, I never saw him again. But as a result of that question, I started studying everything and that anybody told me, doing a lot in terms of religion and politics and economics and science. I stopped taking individuals who had propped themselves up as authorities. I stopped taking their particular view on face value and began to do investigations for myself. And as a result of that, many times I, excelled past my teachers in Sunday school. And one of the things that I hated most about Sunday school was when I had a Sunday school teacher, and I never taught Sunday school, by the way. I was never invited to be a Sunday school teacher in church or anything. All I did was listen to them and engage them and ask questions. But many times the Sunday school teacher would get up with his Sunday school lesson and he would say, y'all have to excuse me, I didn't get a chance to study the lesson this week. Now I'm pissed off at that point because I'm saying, hey, wait a minute, I studied the lesson all week long. Did all the background checks, all the investigations that I need to do to be versed on the lesson, and you're going to get up as the teacher and tell me to excuse you because you have not studied? No. So, but needless to say, I got the left foot of fellowship on many occasions, but here we are today. So why am I doing this? First, I want to thank you all for joining me this morning. And this is just something that's been on my heart for the longest. I've been trying to find my voice. I've been trying to find out, where do I come from? All this stuff that I have, this knowledge that was given to me, I never could process it in a way to communicate it. And I kept trying through my life, making many attempts to communicate, but it never seemed to come out right. It never seemed to fit the way I felt. And it always seemed to have a tendency to separate people as opposed to try to bring minds together. So that's what this Sunday school is all about. I'm going to take the stuff that I've learned and try to use it to bring minds together and hope to affect a better way of looking at life and help humanity on its quest towards a unified mind and peace among itself. So I want to thank you for joining me this morning. And I think I found my voice. I really do. So in that quest to find my voice is a message. And as I said earlier, I've never been one who just take it just because you say you the authority and you've done this. I've just never been that type of person. I do believe, and I'm going to say at the outset, first of all, our lesson is and it's going to be a series, Let My People Go. And we are going to release the ego, the concept of white supremacy in all of its forms, because what we're going to do is expose what it is and how it looks in all its forms. And you're going to be surprised what it looks like, the form that it takes. So the idea of let my people go is the freedom from the ego and the freedom from the concept, the diabolical concept of white supremacy. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the world that has been led by America is crumbling right before our eyes. We're looking at it. And even those of us who are descendants of the ancestors who have prayed for freedom from it are perplexed in the fact that it's crumbling, because we don't know what's coming next, and we have no idea what to do if this thing falls. And so we, even in many cases, don't want it to fall as a result of that, because we don't know what to do. We don't know what's coming behind it. It could be something worse. And we don't like the way it looks as it falls, because we see the blustering of it. We see the contorting of this system, and it's mainly done through the Trump administration. And I'm going to show you, we're going to use the book of Exodus in the Bible to show you many things. But we're seeing, the Trump administration, and America is the leader of the world. And we're seeing this stuff, and it doesn't look good. It looks pretty terrible to the physical eyes as it contorts itself and yells and manipulates as it attempts to remain alive past its time. Now, everything in this realm has a span of existence, and nothing escapes this rule in this world, in this present material world that we happen to be experiencing. There's nothing that escapes that rule. There's a time to be conceived. There's a time that all things are gestated as they in the mind or in the womb. And then there's a time that is born, everything. And then there's a time that it lives. It has a space of time, and some have a long space of time to live, and others have a very short space of time. And then, of course, there's something in between that. And there's also a time for it to pass off the scene, and another generation comes after that. This is a rule, and nothing escapes from this. That includes individuals, that includes families, that includes groups, it includes nations, it includes a series of nations, it includes planets, it includes solar systems and galaxies, and it includes universes. Everything under this material configuration has a lifespan, and it comes and goes, and nothing escapes from it. This is a rule. So when it comes to a nation, the question is there an exception to nations? You often hear about the American exceptionalism, but the question is there an exception? Can anyone escape this and not obey this particular rule? And the answer is obviously no. And if someone has a different answer to that, then please inform me. But from what I see, there's no escape from this process and this experience that we're having, and it includes America. So now, as we're looking and seeing this collapse of this nation and this system, the response from those who have made themselves the victims of this particular system, in many cases, is using the same energy that the system that they don't want, that's being moved out of the way. Those of us who have been victims of it many times respond with the same energy that keeps the system that you don't want in place. I don't know if I made any sense with that. This is Topo Chico water. So if you respond in the same energy and with the same philosophy, changed around and tweaked a little bit, then you're going to discover if you're successful in moving out the system that you deplored, that you have done nothing but rebuilt it in another form, and it's the same thing in another form. It's just dressed up a little differently. So the concept goes like this. You read in the Bible where Jesus was doing all of his little miracles and stuff, you know, healing the sick and all that kind of stuff. And the preachers of the world who he was signaling was on their way out, tried to get the people to believe that Jesus was doing his good works by the power of the devil. So Jesus asked them a question. If Satan casts out Satan, then his kingdom will come to naught, or it will disappear. In other words, if I use good to cast out evil, and the good that I'm using is in fact evil, it's Satan casting out Satan. And on top of that, if Satan uses a particular way to get something done, and God uses a particular way, the same way to get something done, how would you know the difference between God's working and Satan's working? You wouldn't know the difference, because both of them are using the same method. If Satan gets his way by killing and destroying and manipulating, and then God tries to remove Satan by killing and destroying and manipulating, you won't know the difference between God and Satan. If you want to bring in a world of peace, then you have to have concepts that's consistent with the world of peace and has the power to move out the world that you don't want. So Jesus asked them a question at that point. He asked them, if I, by the power of Satan, do good works, by what power do you do good works? Do you see the logic in that? You can't have evil and good as such use the same methodology to cast out evil. Evil has to use evil to stay. Good has to use good to get rid of evil. You can't use darkness to get rid of darkness. You have to bring light into the situation, and light has the power to chase darkness out. So as we go through this lesson, and we're going to be using the story of the children of Israel escaping from Egypt in the Bible, then you will see behind the scenes. I'm going to show you behind the scenes. And this is just lesson one. This is going to be the introductory lesson. And then each Sunday we're going to do this. But we're going to go behind the scenes, and you're going to see the difference that's necessary in order to bring about an entirely new world, an entirely new reality. So the question is, if humanity is to experience the God level of itself or the kingdom of heaven, what is the process in that? How are we going to do that? How are we going to move this out that's here, that we actually see self-destructing on its own? How are we going to move this out? So we're going to go to the book of Exodus, and we're going to take a chapter each week for Sunday school. And but today we're going to read chapter 1 of the book of Exodus, and then we'll begin our lesson right there. So let me just go ahead and read chapter 1 just to give you the introduction, and then we're going to break it down. One other thing I want to say before I do that is to point out the fact that these are just symbols. They are symbols of principles. Principles are like the candy. You want a piece of candy. The principle is the candy. The wrapping that the candy comes in is just the way to deliver the principle to you. But in order for you to understand the principle or taste the candy, you have to take the time to unwrap it. You don't eat the damn wrapper. You take the candy out of the wrapper and eat the candy. So the Bible and the Quran and the Metunet and the Course in Miracles and all these books that we have in the Bhagavad Gita, these are all wrappings for principles. Let me read this and then we'll get started. Exodus chapter 1, and I'm reading from the King James Version. And the reason I read from the King James Version is because before those who have a need to deceive were able to figure out the mysteries of this, they had already printed the King James Version. So the rest of the versions, a lot of the versions that you hear your preacher reading, all of the mysteries that were hidden in the King James Version, who didn't know he was putting them in there, they've been sterilized out of there. So the New International and the new this and the new that, as they figured out the mysteries and wanted to keep you in deception, they got these new versions and these new versions, and I've read pretty much all of them. Here we go. Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brothers and all the generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, look, or behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore did they set over them taskmasters to inflict them with their burdens. They built for Pharaoh treasure cities, and then he listed cities, Python and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. See, if the Egyptians grieved because of the children of Israel, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field, all of their service when they made them serve with rigor. The king of Egypt spoke unto the Hebrew midwives, of which the names of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And they said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew woman, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then save her alive. But the midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, what have you done? Why have you done this thing? And they have saved the men alive. Midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, For they are lively and they are delivered, and the midwife, ere the midwives come unto them, or before the midwives came to them. Therefore God dealt wisely with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mightily. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all of his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. That's chapter 1 of the King James Version of the book. Now, in this particular situation, you see something going on. The children of Israel comes into the land of Egypt through Joseph. And there's a story behind that we're not going to get into, but they were prospering in this land for generations, until a king who didn't know Joseph came on the scene, and he looked around and he said, damn, it's a lot of them. And if we don't do anything, if we get into a war with somebody, they're going to get with the other people and join the war against us. Now, why would they do that? Why would they suspect him of doing that? Well, it's one or two reasons. One, he could have been doing them so wrong that he would be paranoid that justice was coming down on his head, assuming somebody came against that nation. Or number two, he just was did not trust anybody, thinking like a king and saying that these people are not our people, so we better take some measures against them. So he took the extreme route of beginning to oppress them. Before I get into that, I want to put some historical meat on the bones of this story and read you a quick excerpt from an article, Why There Is No Evidence of the Exodus. Now, this article was written by a Hebrew scholar in 2017 from the University of Lincoln, and he's answering the question why there is no evidence of the Exodus as nailed out in this story. According to the biblical scripture, the Hebrews, led by the patriarch Moses, took his formerly enslaved people out of Egypt during the reign of Ramses II. The history of Ramses II is exceptionally well documented, but there is no evidence of any such event. Further, the scriptures tell us that Moses took his followers, numbering in the tens of thousands, over a 40-year trek around what we call today the Middle East. No archaeological evidence of any such diaspora has ever been found of the likely locations that this long event would have been situated, and no historical documentation exists from any of the many different peoples that such an event would have affected. And then he asked the question, why is this? Why is it that, according to the story, that our parents have been taught for 400 years, ironically, in this nation, why is there no archaeological evidence of a children of Israel being enslaved in Egypt for 400 years and wandering around in the desert? Why is there no evidence of that? The Egyptian people, as he said in the article, had exceptionally accurate historical accounts of things that occurred among them, as well as all the nations that were surrounding Egypt would have been affected by this event, but there's no evidence, none of this ever occurring. Then he asked the question, why is this? Canaan, the alleged eventual destination of the Hebrews, was under Egyptian control during this period. So their arrival there would certainly have raised eyebrows among the Egyptian officials governing the province. Do you understand this? Are you hearing what I'm suggesting here with this reading? If this story was true, not only would it have affected Egypt, and it would have been some written documentation, not only would it have affected the surrounding nations as they left Egypt, it would have affected Canaan, the land that they supposedly had gone into, because Egypt was just like the America. It was the ruler of the entire planet. So surely somebody in Canaan who was a surrogate of Egypt, let me calm it down. Surely someone in Canaan who was a surrogate or a governor put up there by Egypt would have known that, hold up, these are slaves coming out of here, and we're ruled by Egypt anyway. You know, you get the obvious picture here. There's a problem. There is no historical evidence of any Hebrew slave being in the nation of Egypt for 400 years, then leaving under the guidance of Moses. There's no evidence, period, of this ever happening. Until and unless we look at this story as an allegory or prophecy of a nation of people who would be fulfilling this prophecy. Now, in the book written by Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Message to the Black Man in America, he postulates that about 80% of the Bible is prophecy and 20% is historical. And as I said, there's no historical evidence of this ever occurring until we get to 1619. And 1619 is when the Pharaoh of, well, let me say this. First of all, it's an allegory. It's the wrapper, the story of these Hebrews being in Egypt is a wrapper over the candy, and you got to unwrap the candy so you can see the principle behind it. And if you discover yourself in this situation, you can look to the books, to the writings to help you discover the principle so that you can escape. This is a prophecy, this story, of a world changing hands. That's what this story is about. In 1555, this is 64 years before they tell us that our fathers landed on these shores. 1555 is the actual year that our forefathers landed on these shores. And in 1555, as in the allegory of Joseph coming into Egypt, we came on this continent. And we prospered, and there was no situation of slavery. There was no color consciousness other than, not color consciousness in the sense of what we have it today. I'm going to take a short break because I got to get this cough out of me. I'm getting a little excited, but I'll come back and pick up from here. So just give me just a few minutes and I'll be right back.
That religious stuff, and besides, I can't relate to your kind. Leave me alone, sad and lonely. Don't wanna let go of this feeling. Lead me to roam, sad and wander. There's too many cracks in my skin.
Okay, we're back, and I think I got myself together here. Oh, by the way, the name of that song is Sunday School by Phil Keaggy, and yes, he is a Christian rock band, the Phil Keaggy Band. Phil Keaggy is still a very, very, very good guitarist to be in Christianity. So let me answer the question by Angela, and I thank you for that question. Who does Joseph represent in the story? And again, you're right on point with the idea. If you look at this as a representation of a principle or a symbol of a principle, then you will be able to see a whole lot of things. Just like every human being that comes on this earth and trying to discover our reasons for being here, we search, we go out, we look, we discover, we explore. So Joseph represents, according to the story, if you follow the principle from the biblical story, it was Joseph's brothers that sold him to the Arabs because they were jealous of him and they were jealous of his father. So they sold him to the Arabs, and it was the Arabs that brought him into Egypt. So that's according to that particular story. But I don't want to get so tough into the symbolic intricacies just yet of it. And I am going to cover all that. I mean, like I say, this is a series, and we're going to go for an hour every day. That we're at the 40-minute mark. But we're going to come back to that too. But Joseph was the first one, or the first group that came into Egypt, or into the existing world, the power that represented the existing world, which was Egypt. In this particular case, you could replace that word Egypt with America, not the United States. But this is a story of worlds changing. Like I said in the beginning, from everything in this universe, everything in this physical world under the rules that govern this thing changes. And that includes gods. That includes gods. Gods change hands. So you might say there's only one God. Well, there's one mind, and you could typify that as gods. And there are thoughts within the mind, just like in your mind, you have one mind, but you have many thoughts in that mind. So when one world changed, the governing God also changes. The governing God, I know y'all love Jesus. I know y'all love the church. I know y'all love all the doctrines that they feeding us. But the fact is, well, America is the power that represents all of the other powers, Angela. It's the power, it is the big dog on the block. And all the rest of the powers, like you say, Canada, Mexico, and then change to the Americas. I'm talking about America, the United States of America. The America part of the United States is about to be cut off. And you will have the United States, which includes the world. It includes the world. It includes the other nations that are coming out of this white supremacist philosophy of America. And like I say, I'm going to get to that. That philosophy manifests itself in almost everything you can see. You think that white-skinned people are white supremacists. I'm here to tell you, as you read this story, you're going to discover that black-skinned people are white supremacists. Asian people are white supremacists. Hispanic people are white supremacists because white supremacy is a philosophy. The physical manifestation of white supremacy is just the skin color that's been typified by white, the term white. And then on the flip side of that philosophy is black inferiority, which are both mindsets. White supremacy is the mind. The opposite of it, in terms of, if you turn it on its head, is black inferiority. You do not want either one of them. And furthermore, if you replace white supremacy with black rule, you will get white supremacy in blackface. You will get white supremacy in blackface because white supremacy is a philosophy, a mindset based on the physical manifestation of an individual. Okay. So this story is talking about a world that changes. And I've already pointed out that there is no historical evidence of this story of Moses happening in this realm. There's no historical evidence until you get to 1555. And when you got to 1555, and then you came to 64 years, you discover that they began to look and see that, the children of Israel, and that's what I'm going to show through this series. I'm going to show a number of things that, in fact, that it is the black people of America, the black-skinned people of America, who symbolize, I want you to understand, symbolize the children of Israel of this story, and the white-skinned people symbolize. It's important that you understand the symbolize, not are, but symbolize. Do you understand that? It's important to understand that these are symbols of a mind. And if you get caught up in the symbol, what you will discover, you will discover that Satan is going between both symbols. And he's using the same mind in each symbol to try to see. He doesn't care, or the ego doesn't care which one of y'all survive, as long as he survives within you. The ego wants to survive within you, but want you dead. So if white-skinned people will serve its purpose, then fine, white supremacy it is. But if he noticed that, damn, they're going down, I need to find another place. Well, guess what? They've been oppressing you all this time, black man. We're going to replace white supremacy with black inferiority. And Satan will be sitting in that one too. So you can't use the mind of white supremacy. I'm only using this word white supremacy yes, I need to use ego. I only use the word white supremacy to typify the physical manifestation, but it has nothing to do with the color of the skin except to the ego. But staying with it, why is it that you can find black people in America in 1555 coming here on the good ship Jesus? Why is there 64 years between that and beginning to bring about this whole idea of a supreme race based on the color of the skin? Why is it that black people fought in the Civil War or the Revolutionary War to free this country from the British and were still subjugated to slavery? This is because there arose a king who knew not Joseph. And they thought about it. Now, these people fought alongside of us, and we've held them in bondage. Now, and then we done betrayed them. If someone comes against us next time, they're not going to point their guns at the other person. And on a side note, they have told you that during all these wars, they were concerned that black men could not fight in their wars. That wasn't the concern at all. They knew that black men could fight. They were just not sure which direction black men would point the guns. And once they became sure which direction we would point our guns, they had no more problems with sending us off the war. It's not about no goodwill, ladies and gentlemen. It's about self-preservation of a system that's diabolical and cannot serve you. And everything about it is a trick to keep you involved in perpetuating the system, typically called white supremacy. They were never in any doubt about whether or not we could fight gallantly. They knew that from the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. They knew that from all the wars of the Indian Wars. And as they took more and more land on this continent, they knew the Buffalo Soldiers. They knew we could fight. It had nothing to do with whether or not we could fight. It had everything to do with whether or not our minds would tell us to point the guns that direction or point the guns this direction. And when they were sure which direction we would point the guns, we were able to go fight and die on the battlefield for a freedom that we had yet to experience. So Egypt is the symbol of power in the story, the symbol of wisdom in the story, the symbol of arrogance in the story, and it ruled the world through its economy, its economic power, its culture, and its military. And so as I bring this to today, I'm suggesting to you that America, the United States of America, is that power that is typified in this book, and the black people or the black-skinned people that's in America are the children of Israel who came from Africa to America and was subjugated to the same slavery that's talked about in this chapter. And as the story goes along, you're going to see that there was a time, because of their moaning, and their moaning represents their thoughts, that the gods' thinking began to move towards their thinking, and the gods began to unravel the power that was holding them in bondage. Now I'm going to make this point, and I'm going to close till next week. I got about 9 minutes here, but I'm hoping I'm laying a good foundation here. And as the gods, and remember I said that the gods represent thoughts, the gods began to hear the children of Israel, or the universe began to move on their behalf, and the gods began to unravel the power that was holding them. The power that was holding them had to do with the change on the minds of the people. Remember, they had been in this country for 400 years. They had literally become to identify with this country year after year, generation after generation. They had fought in wars on behalf of the country. They were part of the economy, an integral part of the economy. So they had been completely identified with the country that was holding them in bondage. And there were those in the country saying, we need to be free, because even though we're part of this, it's not healthy for us. And you can see the sickness, the illness, the things that's going on, the oppression that we're getting from the Egyptians. So though they are saying on one hand we're part of the country, on the other hand, you can clearly see that we are different from the country under which we are serving. So the gods began to move on their behalf and put things in place that will give them the wherewithal to be free. The first thing that the God had to do is to break the back of Egypt. He had to break the back of Egypt, not because he just wanted to break the back of Egypt, but because they depended on Egypt. This was part of their escape from Egypt. And if he had just said, come on, let's go, no, they wouldn't go. Even though their prayer was to go. They didn't recognize their prayer. They didn't realize what they were asking for. So if he just said, okay, here I am, let's go, they wouldn't go. Because they couldn't see a separate thinking. They couldn't see different from the mind under which they were serving. So he had to first break the dependence upon that they had on Egypt. And so he had to break the Egyptian economy. He had to, you notice that a bunch of plagues start coming on Egypt, like fires and pandemics and bugs and broken families and broken institutions. This was all to break the chain that was in the mind of the children of Israel. That's why this was done. Now here's the kicker. Here is the kicker that's going to set you up for the whole story, because I'm going to be bringing bits and pieces into it as we move through the chapters. Remember, the Egyptians were already on an oppressive mode against the children of Israel, which were in their midst. And they began to do things to them. So as they did things to the children of Israel, and as the plagues started coming down on the Egyptians, the God told the children of Israel to stay home. Let that sink in for a minute. He told the children of Israel to stay home. Remember I said that the Egyptians were arrogant? That they say, ain't no plague gonna make me stay home. I'm a free man. But while they were doing that, the gods were telling the children of Israel to stay home, to commune with your families, to eat together, to have conversation, to begin to get in touch with who you are. Stay home. Why did he have to tell them that? He had to tell them and emphasize them to stay home because outside were all the plagues where the Egyptians were. You don't have enough guns. You don't have enough tools. You don't have the experience to fight the Egyptians. You don't know the techniques that they know. You don't have the technology that they have. It's going to take a power beyond this and what we can muster to break the backs of that's holding us in bondage. Stay home. He emphasized that by telling them to take some blood and put it on the doorpost outside your home. These are all symbols. I want you to think about it. Don't think hocus pocus dominocus. I'm a scientist. I don't believe in none of that stuff. That creepy stuff they talking. But these are symbols. They are models. They're hidden in them is a model for you. The blood outside on the doorpost represents death outside of you. Death, blood on the outside symbolizes death. Blood on the inside symbolizes life. If you start bleeding, blood is coming outside of you. It is the symbol of death. And death is not in you. It is outside. And who's outside? Who's outside? The Egyptians, who insist from their arrogance to go outside. And the death angel is passing by. And when he comes to your house and see the blood outside of you, he will pass you by. These are all symbols, ladies and gentlemen. So that's just a caveat for next week as we go into this. But I wanted to throw that at you so that you would see that I know what the hell I'm talking about. Number one. So we're going to intend to show during this series that black people in America are the true children of Israel, and a mixed multitude is coming out. A mixed multitude. The United States is what's coming out of this. A mixed multitude. I want you to catch this stuff. We are at the end of America as we know it. There's no turning back. We're at the beginning of the United States, and there's no turning back. And you cannot use the concept of superiority of color to break away from color-based thinking. If you use superiority based in color or anything favor based in color, you will replace what loathes you with the same thing. Not one American institution is going to survive this. Not one American institution in its present form will be left intact as we emerge from the thinking of America. You all still depend on this. And as I said earlier, that he has to break the back of it, so you will lose all dependence on it and have only dependence on your creator as your source. You think the Democrats are different from the Republicans. You still have a dependence on it. So you're going to have to, the back of it has to be broken. You still depend on the dollar. Even though the dollar is no good anymore. You just don't know it yet. You still depend on their health experts, even though everything about their eating, the way we eat, is death to us. And as you will see, Moses even brought a new way of eating to them, because everything about Egypt was death to the children of Israel who comprised the mixed multitude that came from around the planet that escaped the thinking of Egypt. So next week, tell somebody, same time, same place, and we're going to really break it down on next week as we really go in depth of Let My People Go. And I'm out of here.